Top 10 service rifles that you can clone at home. From assault rifles to sniper rifles, PDWs to DMRs, and everything in between, the United States military has implemented numerous small arms to fill even the most specific roles. Some rifles have been used by servicemen and women for decades, while others gather dust in an arms room, unlikely to ever see combat. If you've clicked on this video, then I'm assuming you have at least some interest in owning one or more of these rifles for yourself, which begs the question, which rifle or rifles should an aspiring cloner spend their hard-earned income on? To answer this question, I've put together a list, in no particular order, of what I believe to be the top 10 small arms used by the U.S. Armed Forces that you can build at home. My criteria for these rifles focuses on two main points. First, that the rifle must be able to be cloned by your average person who does not work in the firearms industry. This might seem obvious, but if you have to jump through a bunch of legal loopholes, such as opening a business with a federal firearms license, in order to own a certain gun, then I'm not going to recommend that type of build. Secondly, the builds that I picked for this list are all reasonably easy to find parts for, which is why they're among the most popular choices in the community. While some of these rifles do have parts lists containing at least one or two items that are difficult to track down, nothing on this list should take more than a few weeks up to a few months to find, assuming that you know where to look. I've also tried to choose rifles that have multiple iterations, further increasing the number of parts that you can use, which are considered clone correct. And before I get into the list, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and let me know what other kinds of content you want to see. Also be sure to check out my company, Space Magic Industries, on Instagram, as well as our website, spacemagicindustries.com, where we design and manufacture the most sought-after clone parts and accessories right here in the USA. Starting off our list is a rifle that will surprise nobody, and that is the M16. Since its initial adoption in the 1960s, the M16 has undergone numerous revisions and changes thanks to its extremely modular design. In fact, nearly half of the rifles on this list are some variation of Eugene Stoner's original design, which clearly demonstrates its ability to adapt to nearly any role. For now, we'll focus on the 20-inch barreled M16, jokingly referred to as a musket by cloners due to its age and its overall length. Even the most modern version, the M16A4, has been largely pushed out of service, but this actually ends up supporting hobbyists as parts kits from the military slowly make their way onto the commercial market. Optics and accessories from the M16A4 are commonly available from the manufacturer, with companies like Trijicon offering contracted versions of the ACOG for consumers to buy. Though if modern bells and whistles aren't your thing, the M16A1 and M16A2 are very drama-free clones to assemble, as you'll just have to track down a sling and a magazine to go with the rifle itself. Not only does the M16 have several variants across time, but also across different military branches, since the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and the Air Force all configure the rifles slightly differently between different groups within each branch, meaning there are plenty of options to choose from during the M16's time in service. Number 2 on the list is the M16's replacement, the M4 carbine. Almost everything that I just said about the M16 also applies to the M4, with its incredible level of modularity leading to its impressively long time in service. Officially adopted in 1994, the M4 carbine featuring a 14.5-inch barrel dethroned the M16 due to its more compact size being advantageous in virtually every scenario it found itself in. No clone collection would be complete without at least one of the M4's many variants, whether that be the iconic M4A1 currently used by infantrymen from every branch of the U.S. military, or one of the more obscure customized rifles used by groups within U.S. SOCOM. A personal favorite of mine is the Block 2 rifle from the SOP-MOD program, which gave the end user the ability to customize their rifle to an extent rarely seen before. And just like with the M16, you can choose from variants of the M4 that range from archaic to cutting edge and everything in between, with some versions featuring iron sights, electro-optics, magnified scopes, lasers, flashlights, and even suppressors. A common consensus within the clone community is that if you could only have one rifle, it should be an M4 of some kind. My third recommendation for service rifles to clone is the CQBR, also commonly referred to as the Mark 18. For many enthusiasts, myself included, the Mark 18 was the first clone that we ever built, which I mostly attribute to the abundance of pictures found online of cool guys wearing cool tactical gear carrying these really cool rifles. From Army Special Forces groups to the Navy's SEAL teams, the Mark 18 is a staple within US SOCOM. While its original purpose was to replace the 9mm MP5 for certain roles, operators found that the Mark 18 was sufficiently lethal for a variety of other tasks, while being no more cumbersome than their standard M4 carbine even with a suppressor mounted. Whether you want to build the original Mod 0 or Block 1 rifle, or the iconic CQBR Block 2, there's no shortage of parts for these rifles in circulation on the commercial market. In fact, Mark 18s have actually gotten easier to build over the years as companies like Daniel Defense turn to the commercial market to sell their handguards now that US SOCOM is no longer purchasing them. Certain accessories, such as the WMX 200 flashlight commonly seen on Mark 18s, are very rare and prohibitively expensive, but luckily there's no shortage of alternatives, with many pictures showing cheaper and readily available options on issued rifles as well, such as the Surefire Scout Light. The Mark 18 is a clone that I highly recommend keeping in your collection, since selling one almost always results in the desire to build another one shortly after. Number 4 on my list is another clone that's so commonly done that it's almost boring, and that is the Mark 12 SPR, as well as the Recce rifle. I'm going to group these two types of builds together, since they're so similar in what parts they use and what they're used for. Similar to the CQBR, the SPR, or Special Purpose Receiver, was originally intended to be a drop-in upper receiver that could be installed in a standard lower by the end user in order to fill a more niche role. Whereas the CQBR was intended for fighting in confined spaces, the SPR, and by extension the Recce rifle, was designed to extend the user's effective range further than their standard infantry rifle. In other words, the SPR bridged the gap between an infantry rifle and a dedicated sniper system. With the added benefit of sharing the same caliber as the M4 and M16, the Mark 12 and Recce rifle variants were relatively capable in fast-paced environment, which led to one or more versions being implemented by every branch of the military. Whether you want to build the Army's Mark 12 Mod 0, or 5th Group's Mod Holland, the Navy and Marine Corps' Mod 1, or the SEAL Team's Recce rifles, or even the more obscure SAMR or SDMR rifles, these variants all had very similar build lists, with the only major differences between them and a regular M4 or M16 usually being a match-grade barrel, a free-floated handguard, and a precision optic of some kind. Another common sentiment among cloners is that if you had to choose only 3 rifles for your collection, they should be a Mark 18 for short range, an M4 for medium range, and a Mark 12 for long range shooting. And I, for one, am happy we don't live in a world where we have to make that choice. The 5th service rifle that I recommend for cloners is the FN SCAR, and before you all start angrily typing in the comments section, I'm aware that the SCAR is somewhat controversial in the firearms world. The quirks involved in owning a SCAR combined with its high price tag result in a lot of well-deserved scrutiny towards the platform, but I'm going to do my best to plead my case as to why they're still worth considering as a clone project. First and foremost is going to be reliability, as the SCAR does have a reputation for remaining functional even in harsh conditions and with bare minimum maintenance. Between the 4 SCAR rifles that I've personally owned, I can count on one hand the number of malfunctions I've had between all of them. This goes for my Mark 16 clone, both of my Mark 17 clones, one 13-inch SPR and one 16-inch rifle, and my Mark 20 SSR clone. While the Mark 16 has been phased out of service, the Mark 17 and Mark 20, both chambered in 7.62 NATO, both currently see use within US SOCOM as compact battle rifles, designated marksman rifles, as well as dedicated sniper systems. For the aspiring cloner wanting to clone one of these rifles, what the SCAR lacks in affordability it makes up for in simplicity. It's uncommon for a clone build to involve simply purchasing a complete rifle and then mounting the proper accessories to it, but in the case of the SCAR, that's all there is to it. The original version of the SCAR with the reciprocating charging handle is still commonly seen for sale on websites like Gunbroker, though if you decide to use the newer non-reciprocating version of the SCAR, you'll probably only get slightly crucified by the clone community when you post pictures of it online, which you almost certainly will because, as a SCAR owner, you love the attention the rifle gets you both in person and on the internet. Number 6 is another high-end piston rifle just like the SCAR, but without the polarizing reputation among gun owners. The HK416, and by extension the HK417, first saw use by the US military in 2004, constantly growing in popularity to the point that the Marine Corps now issues a version of the 416 as their standard infantry rifle, while the Army issues a designated marksman rifle based on the 417. Synonymous with Tier 1 groups and clandestine operations, the HK416 and 417 take the familiar ergonomics of the AR-15 platform and combine them with a robust, short-stroke gas piston operating system that improves the weapon's function in conditions that would normally render a fighting rifle inoperable. Though normally seen in use by Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, these are commonly found in clone collections as well. Original HK brand parts are scattered throughout the market, including entire upper receivers, though I should warn you that the price tags reflect the weapon's reputation. Luckily, there are a few manufacturers who specialize in making HK-style parts, meaning that you can assemble your own rifle lunchbox style, one piece at a time. Unless you're very wealthy, you'll want to get comfortable with this concept, as most cloners have to slowly accumulate the parts on our shopping list over the course of several months, hoping that on our next paycheck we'll have worked just enough overtime to afford that trigger guard for our build. The 7th clone build on my list is a relative newcomer to the clone scene, that being the LVAW, or low visibility assault weapon based on the Sig Sauer MCX. Despite SIG's best effort to ruin their own reputation in recent years, the clone community as a whole has been clamoring for parts to build these insanely cool rifles. But what makes the LVAW so cool? For starters, it has the honor of being the first weapon chambered in 300 Blackout to be formally adopted by the US military, with the intent and purpose of being an extremely quiet weapon system that retains the benefits of a powerful rifle caliber, unlike its predecessor, the MP5 SD. For cloners like myself who continually house an internal struggle between their love of outdated military equipment and the desire for a modern fighting rifle, the LVAW checks all of the boxes. While still having a military pedigree, the LVAW is often seen outfitted with modern cool guy accessories, meaning that this rifle can pull double duty as a capable self-defense rifle and as the cornerstone of your collection. Though there's currently a shortage of parts, such as the LVAW's handguard, this will soon be a problem of the past when Space Magic Industries releases our reproduction rail in the coming months. Shameless plugs aside, now is the best time to start your LVAW build, as the base rifles are readily available, and we'll be making versions of the handguard for every generation of MCX that SIG has released thus far. The 8th clone build that I recommend for any collection is without a doubt the most iconic submachine gun in history, the MP5. Although recently phased out of service in favor of 300 Blackout rifles like the aforementioned LVAW, the MP5 is an exceptionally prolific system with a proven track record that leaves many enthusiasts unwilling to give theirs up. Like the FN SCAR, the MP5 isn't so much a weapon that you build as one that you simply buy and accessorize. And while HK does sell a commercial variant called the SP5, you also have the cost-effective option of buying a non-HK brand MP5 from several different companies. Since parts are readily available and have a near universal compatibility between brands, it's possible to buy an off-brand MP5 and simply swap out any necessary parts to make it more closely resemble the variant that you're after. You could even clone the iconic MP5 SD, as companies like Dakota Tactical sell them as complete builds, while B&T offers the suppressors and the barrels on their own. And while the MP5's 9mm cartridge lacks the energy of a rifle caliber, it more than makes up for it in ammo cost and its legendarily smooth recoil impulse, which is why when somebody asks me in 2025 if they should build a pistol caliber carbine or a 300 Blackout, I simply ask them back, why not both? One quick warning before I get into these last two build recommendations. I decided to include these on the list as options for the more seasoned cloner. These builds are quite a bit more expensive and research intensive and are also harder to source parts for than the previous entries on the list. So I wouldn't recommend them unless you've already assembled a few clones, at which point you should have at least a few connections and also scouted out several places to find parts. And on a side note, if you'd like for me to make a video on how and where to find clone parts, then let me know down in the comments. With all that being said, number 9 on my list is the SAS, or Semi-Automatic Sniper System. Although this term technically refers to the Knights Armament M110 specifically, it's often used to encompass other similar rifles such as the Mark 11, which is also based on the Knights Armament SR-25. Chambered in 7.62 NATO, the SAS is a rare departure from what is normally considered a bona fide sniper system, being capable of semi-automatic fire rather than being a bolt action. Both the M110 and Mark 11 have the added benefit of sharing the AR-15's ergonomics and controls, meaning that there's very little additional training needed in order for the user to proficiently operate the weapon. The SAS is most often issued as an entire deployment kit, complete with rifle, suppressor, precision optic, sling, cleaning kit, and magazines, all of which are specifically chosen in order to support its role as a sniper rifle. These rifles make the obvious trade-off of bolt action levels of accuracy in exchange for faster follow-up shots and greater ammo capacity, making them more suited for snipers who find themselves in more dynamic environments, such as during urban operations. Building a semi-automatic sniper system requires a higher level of dedication and patience than most other clone builds, since the market for many of its components is highly competitive, meaning that there's a higher cost of entry and that any good deals that pop up are snatched almost immediately. The good news is that it's easier than ever to build one of these rifles, since companies like HTX Concepts manufacture reproduction parts like the upper receiver, barrel, and gas blocks, while our friends at Tier 1 outfitters are gearing up to make the suppressors. In the past, the only way to obtain a reasonably accurate M110 or Mark 11 clone was to buy an entire base rifle from Knights Armament and then have it converted with the correct parts, which was more costly and less efficient. But as the clone community grows, so too does the number of companies interested in helping us out. Unfortunately, I can't say that this applies to the last entry on the list, though. Number 10, and my final recommendation for the veteran cloner, is the Mark 13 sniper rifle. A lot of what I'm about to say will apply to other bolt-action sniper rifles used by the military as well, but for the purposes of this video I felt like the Mark 13 was the best fit due to its long time in service and the fact that it has the most variations to choose from. Throughout the global war on terror, the Mark 13 and its many forms have seen use as a proper, bolt-action sniper rifle chambered in the venerable 300 Winchester Magnum. Traditionally, these rifles were built in-house by Crane armorers for US SOCOM, and fortunately for us civilians, there are several gunsmiths that specialize in building Mark 13s, including Chris at Red Bull Armory, who is a former Crane armorer himself. Assuming you can track down all of the parts, you can simply send him the parts along with a check for a reasonable amount of money, and he'll send you back a rifle that looks like it came straight out of a SEAL armory, from the blueprinting of the action down to the proof marks on the barrel. The real challenge in building a Mark 13 is in finding parts like the stock or the chassis. In the past, demilled parts kits were available that would provide most, if not all, of the rarest components, but since those dried up years ago, you'll likely have to spend months tracking them down one by one. This is why I don't recommend that people who are new to the hobby start on one of these builds until they have a grasp of where to find clone parts and how to find out about their current market value. That way they don't end up on scam sites like Charlie's Custom Clones where they'll overpay for a part that never actually arrives. With all that in mind, I personally view a completed Mark 13 build as a true benchmark for one's transition from casual clone enthusiast into full-blown oddist. And on the off chance that you don't run a YouTube channel that relies on selling old builds in order to fund new ones and therefore new content, then you might even get to keep your piece of history disguised as a small fortune long enough to give it to your kids someday. So, what did you guys think of my list? Are there any service rifles that you would have included instead of my picks? Let me know down in the comments, and if you want to see more clone-related content, then be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.